Hi, my name is Daniel Wyatt, and I am CEO and founder of MixmasterWyatt.com and Mixmaster Wyatt Academy, where we teach people online how to mix and master. And I wanted to take this opportunity to show one of my favorite plugins, probably really one of the best, if not the best de-esser on the market, the suppressor. Sometimes I call it the super-esser, but I think the proper name is suppressor. But it is super, so if you want to call it super, feel free. And essentially what we're doing here is we're de-essing the entire pre-master or mix during the mastering process. Sometimes people say, oh, I missed the sound of vinyl. I love the sound of vinyl. The bass was better. The highs were smoother. And sometimes it sounds a bit nostalgic, but in fact, there is some real technical truth involved there, because in order to make it so that the needle wouldn't skip, a mastering cutting engineer for vinyl would mono the low frequencies and usually picked a crossover somewhere around 200, 300, 400, 300, very, very popular. And so essentially what that would mean is that the low frequencies would get monoed below that crossover, and you'd have this very, very focused mono bass. And many, many club systems are mono. So what happens is if there was phase difference in the bass, you would get some cancellation typically, and you'd lose some low frequency. So when people say the low frequency on my vinyl record sounds amazing, that is not just nostalgia. That is in fact true. And it's something that we do in modern mastering as well. We borrow a little bit from the vinyl days, and we will mono or very much narrow the low frequencies. But another noteworthy thing in the vinyl mastering process is there was quite a bit of de-essing, and there was also an attempt just to keep the needle from skipping. So when CDs came along and digital formats prevailed, mastering engineers sometimes got lazy, I want to say, or felt they didn't need to de-ess as aggressively as they did in the vinyl cutting days. So that gave digital, I think, a bad name, where people said, oh, the digital sounds so harsh and edgy. One of the reasons is that some engineers abandoned using de-essing in the mastering process. And essentially what this de-esser is doing, it has a couple different modes, but the mode that we use in mastering is we use a band style gain reduction here with a band style trigger. In other words, we have the entire frequency bandwidth of the mix, but we're just focusing on those frequencies that the human ear is most sensitive to and that are harsh to human hearing. Usually it lives between 6 and 12K, some people say, 5 and 14 I've seen. It's really a matter of opinion, but it's typically in that range. And so there are two things that the human ear doesn't like. One of them is very wide dynamics in that range. We don't like it when it goes from very quiet to very loud in the mid-range. It's what we call pokey or spiky, and it hurts your ears. And we also just don't like an excess of it. Both things, both an excessive amount or too much dynamics in that range kind of hurts our ears. So we use this tool to tame the frequencies that we're most sensitive to. And typically, I use a lot of different things in my mastering chain, but typically I will saturate first, and the Oxford inflator is just the best, cleanest mastering saturator. I don't leave home without it. I always use it, sometimes if only a little bit. And then we'll usually apply some EQ, some dynamics, and the limiter usually almost always will go last, because once you make things that loud, there really is very little headroom for any other plugins after the limiter, and that's the final step would be to apply the dithering. So the de-esser typically sits for me right before the limiter. And I tend to set it last, which is I leave it off and I make things sound good. And then right at the very end, once I think I've really worked hard to shape the sound, get the level up. As we know, EDM, things have to be loud. So once I've done that, then I turn on the de-esser. And if we take a look at this here, the lay of the land, there's different sort of components here, although it's a very sophisticated tool, but we can use it rather simply. So you can listen to the entire mix with the de-essing effect going. We can listen to inside of the de-esser, inside this region, to dial in what we find offensive or what we find is overly sibilant. And then we can also listen to the outside as well, and see what it sounds like without that band. But typically, you're going to listen to the inside. You can adjust the width here, and you can also adjust the slope. And then here is a slider that helps you get the center frequency where you think things are most offensive. Now, if you overly apply de-essing, you can make the mix or the master sound dull. But I find, and this is a tricky thing to describe, but those who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. When you set the de-esser correctly, it actually sounds brighter because you're minimizing some squinty frequencies that can almost feel like distortion. And as those frequencies get leveled out and contained, the good high end is able to come through. So I find what I'm always looking for when I go in and out of bypass is I'm actually making sure that, one, I'm not making it too dull, and two, that it actually feels like it's getting brighter. So we're set up here. We have a Matt Winter production, deep house song, and usually what we'll do in mastering is loop the chorus and make a good setting on the chorus. So let's give this a listen here. And that presently is where this band pass is set. So let's listen. Let's first listen to the entire mix. And then we can go back and now listen to what we're actually attenuating and what's triggering the attenuation, which is the frequencies within this region here. This one is 4.6 to 11.4K. Now, a very, very helpful way to do this, and I know this sounds funny because we spend a lot of time as engineers trying to make things sound as good as possible, but you want to do the opposite when you set the inside of your de-esser here. You want to make it sound as bad as possible. Whatever you think is as offensive as you can make it, that's what you're looking to do here. So let's see how offensive we can make it. That, again, this is all very subjective, but I found that there were some very excessive frequencies a little bit higher in this mix than you would typically get, and that's fine. This is why this job is still done by humans and with sensitivity. So in my opinion today, there was some very excessive high frequencies, really between around 9.5 and 17.8. And in digital too, when you're mixing, you want to try to use some high cuts and tame some of these high frequencies to make it sound warm and analog. So in any event, that's what we've defined as being most offensive today. And we'll go back to the mix listen, and then we'll adjust our threshold. And you'll notice what I did was I did something very extreme. I exaggerated it at first. I do this almost all the time with everything I do, just to see what too far is right away. And then once you know what too far is, you can actually, you visually know what it is, you sonically know what it is, and you can go back and be subtle. So as you see, some of this stuff is very, very light-handed, and I achieved what I was trying to achieve here, which is when I go in and out of bypass, that the de-essed signal sounds brighter because the undesirable high frequencies are being tamed. There's a lot more to this de-esser, lots more under the hood, many more applications, but really what I'd like you to take away from this tutorial is the necessity to always de-ess during the mastering process, even if you just do a little bit. And the Sonnox Oxford suppressor is absolutely one of the best tools to do high quality de-essing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. My name is Daniel Wyatt from MixmasterWyatt.com and the Mixmaster Wyatt Academy. See you soon.